Hello my friends, welcome back to another video. My name is Ian with Out of This World Reader, and today's video is going to be my January wrap-up. Overall, it was just a really great month of reading. I think I had like 3 or 4 5-star reads. So we just kicked off the year with a bang. I also finished off my break from university, so there was actually quite a few books and some thick books that I read over just the remainder of that break, and then just towards the end of the month with starting back up with university. I didn't get to as much as I was hoping to, but overall, I think I read almost 11 or 12 books in a month, and there were some big books. So I think without further ado, let's hop in with all the books that I read in January. So first off, I did sadly have a DNF, and this one, I've had a pretty complicated relationship with this author. It's a mystery thriller author that kind of everyone has been talking about, and I picked up Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I absolutely loved Lock Every Door and Home Before Dark, but I think Final Girls, I just really didn't enjoy that. It was very predictable, and I just didn't enjoy that going on, and I was like, well, maybe I'll enjoy this, but from the start, I didn't like it at all. But in here you follow Charlie, who's kind of trying to get out of university after the death of her roommate by the famous campus killer, and she feels like it was her fault that her roommate got murdered, so she's just wanting to get out of town, and she kind of goes to a driving board, and she finds the mysterious Josh Baxter, who kind of offers her to take her back to her hometown because it's on his way, and she's like, why not? Let's just get in a car with a random person. And then along the way, she starts to discover that this mysterious person, might actually be the campus killer, and she's kind of trying to survive the night. Honestly, Charlie as a protagonist was kind of really stupid. I hate saying that, but she just wasn't making smart decisions at all. Even early on in the story, whenever she was this is kind of spoilers, so I'll make sure to leave timestamp aware, but early on in the story, when she was kind of starting to figure out that maybe this guy isn't who he says he is, she just decides we're not gonna get out of the car and just turn around, call her boyfriend, and just go home and just let the police deal with this. We're not gonna do that. We're just gonna continue on and try and stop him, because she has to get revenge and make sure that he doesn't do it to anybody else. So there was several points when she could have honestly just called the police and told them, but no, she was like, I have to do it myself. And there's also elements of just being lost in her own kind of movies, because she's a fan of movies, so she also just randomly just gets these glimpses and movies play out in her mind, and she can't trust whether she is seeing actual real things or whether it's just all in her mind. So it almost felt I just couldn't connect with any of that. It just felt it was just stupid. That was just a stupid scenario. I felt like I did like the elements of film, but the way that it was kind of incorporated, I just didn't like that at all. And it just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't care anymore if she survives the night or anything, and so I had to put it down. And then we had maybe the earliest contender for the most surprising book I read this year. I wasn't expecting to like this at all. That was Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I've heard great things about The Perks of Being Wallflower, but I was very curious to see how this would kind of compare to that. But I believe that that's kind of a contemporary, and this is kind of a little bit of a spooky horror. And I hadn't picked up very many horrors, so I wasn't kind of expecting to like this at all. But I love this so much. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars, and it was just the whole book, even though it's kind of a thick book, there's definitely some points in here that could have been cut out to kind of slim it down, and it felt unnecessary sometimes, but for the majority, I enjoyed listening to this as an audiobook, and I definitely recommend. I can't remember who the narrator was, but she did an absolutely perfect job of narrating the children's perspective, and just the whole story. It just was so immersive in just the narration. But if you haven't heard of this, this follows Christopher and his mom, who kind of leave an abusive relationship. She's fleeing from her husband, who abuses both her and, I believe, Christopher, if I remember right. And they flee to this small town in Pennsylvania with this woods. But Christopher, once he gets there, he starts to kind of notice things, and he's trying to fit in with everyone else. And he wanders into the forest, and he just disappears for 6 days. And then after that 6 days, he kind of returns from the forest, and he's just completely changed But slowly you start to discover that going into the forest really changed Christopher, and now he's kind of got something, he's kind of on a quest, and he's kind of trying to build this treehouse before Christmas. Otherwise, just some bad things are going to happen. So he's trying to build this treehouse, and along the way you kind of uncover more things kind of hiding in the background and what's really going on in this small town, and how it's kind of impacted it through thousands of years. And I just loved everything about this. Like I can go on for days about this. But if you're looking for like a book similar to Stranger Things, I would definitely recommend this, because Stranger Things is one of my favorite kind of TV series, and I'm very excited for the new season. But in here, there's almost a similar aspect of in season 1, you know, how the different realms, but also Christopher kind of makes friends, and they're all kind of connected in this web that's kind of surrounded and kind of intertwined into this this town, the small Pennsylvania town, and everyone's kind of connected to it, and they started to discover. So there was like so many similarities that I was kind of connecting with both this book and Stranger Things. And there was definitely elements of kind of horror mixed in, and early on, like, I was really creeped out. And then towards the middle end, like in the middle of the book, I was really starting to just connect more with it and kind of see the similarities to Stranger Things. And it was still kind of mixed in a little bit of spooky moments. I just enjoyed just like all of it. But other than those kind of moments where it felt like it was dragging on, like, I just loved everything about this, and that is why it got 4.5 stars. And the next book that I got to was a fantasy romance, and it's a very popular series, and it was the second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses, which is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, and I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I'm not going to bore you on kind of what happens in here, because it is everywhere, like it's book talk, just anything. You see this as a recommendation for both Sarah J. Maas and just fantasy romance. That being said, I did enjoy this one a ton more than the first book. I enjoyed kind of the romance between Rhysand and Feyre, as well as kind of just the setting of the Night Court and all the other kind of characters involved in the Night Court, and just learning more about them, as well as with Rhysand, and kind of understanding what he did in the first book. It's like, I just love that a ton more than just kind of like Tamlin. I guess Lucien is kind of fine, and especially in the second book, like I wanted to kill Tamlin, like. And I also felt like in this book, like the truer kind of umbrella plot was really unfolded in here, like revealed, and it felt like there was a little bit more elements of magic involved in this one and then in the first one, which I did enjoy, because I always love magic. But all I gotta say about this is the ending, though. I'm very curious to see where it goes based on just how the second book ended, so I'm very eager to pick up the third book here pretty soon. Sorry if the camera shifted all throughout this video. Izzy has been kind of trying to take down the camera stand. But then the next book that I read was a 5-star read. I think the first 5-star read of 2022, and it is an early contender for top 10 books of the year, and that was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I think Brandon Sanderson in general is just becoming one of my favorite authors. Like, I think that's pretty cliche in fantasy, because everyone talks about him and everyone loves his books, but I truly kind of connect with just all of his books. And I've only read Mistborn and this, but I don't, like, just based on those experiences, I think I will just continue to love all of his books. And this one is no different than Mistborn trilogy. I absolutely love just the sci-fi setting and just those first kind of YA series that I've kind of experienced from him. I still consider like Mistborn an adult kind of series, because that was kind of the first one that I read, and I wasn't kind of used to all that. But if you don't know what this is, this follows Spencer and just the remainder of humanity, from what they know, that's kind of crashed onto this planet, and they have to bury underground to survive the attacks from the Krell. And the planet's kind of heroes are these pilots that go up into the sky and fight the Krell attacks and make sure that humanity kind of survives the bomb attacks. And Spence's family used to be kind of highly regarded in this pilot's kind of status, and the pilots are considered, I would seem, like nobility, and her father was one of the greatest pilots to ever live and kind of fight. But after the battle that kind of shifted the tides in the war with the Krell, her father kind of mysteriously fled, and because of that decision that he made, Spencer and her remaining family, like her mom and her grandma, have kind of been pushed aside into the shadows. But because of that, they have all been branded as cowards, and she has now been able to kind of become a pilot because of that. But now she is kind of entered into the training academy, and she's going to be a pilot again. I just love just like the training academy setting. I will always love that as well. But just learning more about Spensa as general, like seeing her kind of grow in the first book, especially because she goes from being someone who's kind of cocky and arrogant to someone who's understanding that she's not the greatest kind of pilot ever and she has things to learn. I know a lot of people don't like Spensa as a character, but honestly, like, I really connected with her and just like loved seeing just like how she kind of changed in this first book. I'm very excited to see how she will kind of change in the second book. I also loved Mbot and Deathslug. Those two are just absolutely hilarious. Mbot is the best, and then Deathslug kind of just chills over there. Like, I love them both. And ever since finishing this, it has been on my mind, so I can't wait to pick it up. But ever since finishing it, the second book has been on my mind, and I can't wait to pick it up. And next up, we actually had 2 5-star reads back to back, and that was Jade City by Fonda Lee, which is the first book in the Greenbone saga. I've started to see this everywhere, and I really wanted to pick it up, and thankfully, Mel Reads kind of did a channel series read-along, and when I saw that announced, I knew I had to finally pick it up. But short story short, I really enjoyed this. But if you haven't heard of this, as follows the family members of the No Peak clan who live on Kekon, which is like a fictional urban fantasy setting that kind of centers their whole world and everything around the use of jade, and basically kind of the clans control the island, and their rivals, the Mountain Clan, are kind of starting to gain a bigger presence in kind of the city of Janloon and just the Kekon in general. And because of this, the No Peak clan kind of have to respond. And because of that kind of response, there's kind of just this war that's kind of looming over the horizon. And you just follow several different perspectives of the family members of the No Peak clan, and just seeing how they're kind of making decisions within these politics, as well as kind of in just the war and kind of starting off and just everything about that. Said to be kind of like Godfather mixed with magic, and I totally agree. Peaky Blinders is one of my favorite TV shows ever, and I loved that so much, and I was hoping that I would kind of love this as much as well, and I did. I love kind of seeing how the politics were involved in just the whole island of Kekon, and how the clans kind of ruled everything, and how the kind of civilians were kind of taking sides, and how they played a role in everything and going on, and kind of the war looming on the distance, but also as well following the perspectives of the different family members and seeing them kind of step into roles and fill shoes that they weren't used to, and kind of going about day-to-day life with just the constant threat of death looming. So I thought that was very interesting. I loved that aspect of it. The way that the fight scenes were kind of done in here was absolutely outstanding, and the way that kind of Jade was incorporated in it, I loved that. There in the beginning, like, I was really worried that I wasn't going to love this, because it seemed like it was just focusing, kind of building up, and there's just like one point in here where everything kind of just heats up. And because of that, like, you won't be able to put that down. So I definitely recommend, if you're kind of like questioning it, definitely wait for that one moment, because once you read it, you will definitely know what I'm talking about. And then after that, like, I couldn't put the book down. But I'm very eager to see where the series goes in Jade War. And then sadly, we had a disappointing book, and that was Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. I feel like my enjoyment of the series is kind of going down with each book. And I'm really struggling with God Emperor of Dune right now. Like, that is just feels like I'm in a fever dream, and this one as well. Towards the end, I was like, what am I reading here? But I ended up giving 3 stars because I did like kind of the little adventure story that Leto and Ganima kind of go on. But other than that, like, towards the end, I was like what? What is the point of all this kind of, like, what's going on here? Like, it definitely touches on just a lot of kind of politics, government, and just ecology, and that's also what I'm kind of getting in God Emperor of Dune. Just a lot of just questioning things and kind of bringing up the past and kind of looking deeper at that. And like, I just really want to go back to what like we were going for in Dune, and it's just like it just like it almost goes like on different parallels for each book, and I just am not enjoying it at all. Like, people say that the kind of series and the whole kind of plot kind of kicks off towards the end of the series, and like I don't know if I want to continue anymore. That's really where I'm at. Like, I'm considering DNFing God Emperor of Dune right now. But Children of Dune kind of follows Ganima and Leto, as well as some of the other kind of family members of Paul in the first book. And like I kind of honestly can't even remember. I'm not a big fan of this book or kind of the series in general. Like the first book was great, but after that I just wasn't connecting with it. I didn't like how Leto and Ganima kind of like are children, and then all of a sudden they just are all knowing and kind of they had the prescience and just knowing what was kind of going on. I just didn't enjoy that. I wanted to see some growth from them rather than just them all of a sudden being all powerful and stuff. But if you did enjoy, please give me a little bit of kind of motivation to continue on. But we'll see where kind of this goes in the future. Maybe I just need to take a break from it. Next up, we had another horror book that I read this month, and it's actually kind of like a little YA book because I'm almost scaredy cat. And that was White Smoke by Tiffany G. Jackson. I've heard great things about the author, and then specifically about this one. I heard a lot of hype around it around Halloween time, so I picked up a copy, but I never read it at Halloween time, so I thought, why not? Let's just read it in winter, because that is another time that I do enjoy to pick up horror. And this one was honestly kind of really creepy. Like, there were some definitely points where I was like a little freaked out, and the elements of kind of like bed bugs in here, like that was really kind of creepy as well. Like there was times when I would like stop reading and like check on like my arms and everything to make sure I didn't have any bites. So it just added kind of like the atmosphere and the story as well, and just the plot in general too, because Marigold is kind of affected by that. But there was also like some triggers that I would definitely recommend looking up before picking this up. It had commentary kind of like on class, racism, and just a ton of other things. And the only thing that I didn't enjoy, but this is kind of just like me and this whole things that I do enjoy and read, and it had an open ending, and I was hoping that it would kind of conclude. It almost felt kind of rushed there towards the end, and I just really wanted it to just kind of like finish it off, like, you know, like some books it does it pretty good, but with this one, like I just wasn't connecting with it. But if you don't know what this is, this follows Marigold, who moves with her kind of blended family to Cedarville, which is kind of like this mysterious town, but her mom was kind of offered this position as a writer, and because of that they got this house, and they moved into this house, and just as they kind of start to kind of move in and get used to there's the community and everything going on, they learn more about what happened in the community's past as well as kind of in the house's past, and some phantoms and kind of other things are kind of spooking Marigold and just the family in general. And then slowly on kind of Marigold kind of starts to piece together more about what's really going on. And then I just loved where it went from there. But I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend this. The next book I got to was 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. This was honestly kind of like the best thriller or mystery thriller that I picked up in a while. I've just been in a rut, and thankfully this one's kind of helped me get out of that kind of hole that I've dug myself in. But this one was really interesting because it focused on the pandemic, and it's kind of the first book I believe that I've read that kind of has focused on the COVID-19 and the outbreak of that. But if you haven't heard of this follows Ciara and Oliver, who live in Ireland, and they kind of meet each other at the grocery store, and then COVID kind of outbreak hits the Irish shores, and because of that they make the decision to kind of move in together. I know, like, just meet each other and move into each other, but it was kind of only supposed to be 2 weeks, as we all kind of remember. So they thought, like, why not? Like, they both kind of moved to Ireland like a couple weeks ago, and they're kind of getting used to it, so they thought, like, why not? So let's just move in together. And then 56 days later, you follow another perspective through a detective who kind of walks into this apartment building and finds a decomposing body. And, like, as you kind of go along through the story, you have like these split timelines kind of trying to piece together everything, as well as kind of perspectives of both Ciara and Oliver, so you don't know who the body is. But I kind of liked the aspect of the COVID. Like, it was definitely spooky, because I remember like when the outbreak kind of initially happened and being in kind of university, I was on like a giant chem lecture, and the professor was like, well, we have to go home now. And they just stopped the lecture and they sent us all home, as well as kind of going to Sam's and trying to get food, and just everyone going crazy. Like, I just remember that. So it was kind of spooky to read that. So there was definitely elements of that. So if you don't want to kind of read something like that, I would definitely steer clear of this. I wasn't expecting to like this as much as I did, but overall, like, just the only things that I didn't like were in the points where it would kind of focus more on just the pandemic rather than the plot. And like, the pandemic affected the plot in general, but there were some times where it just like focused more on just like the events of the pandemic rather than how it kind of connected back to the plot. As well as kind of like with the ending, I was kind of hoping for a fight for survival, but like I was just really kind of disappointed with that element as well. That being said, though, I thought I had the plot twist kind of figured out, but I didn't. There was like another kind of little twist that was kind of added in here, and because of that I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I'm very interested to check out more by the author in the future. And the last 5-star book that I read this month was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is actually the Biblionauts kind of series read along that we're doing, and we started in January, so if you still want to join in, you definitely could. But I love this. Like, I think a lot of people do love this, and I've heard the 3rd book, like, people didn't like it, but I absolutely loved everything about it. Had elements of the training academy, and just seeing Rin grow as well at the training academy and kind of being thrown into a war. I loved it. That being said, though, like this book definitely painted the horrors of war, and that is something that I haven't read a lot in a lot of other books. Like, I feel like they kind of steer clear of just the horrors of war and just everything that goes on because of that, and just how civilians are affected that as well. And it just hurt me to kind of read and understand that these events in the book were inspired by events that actually occurred. But just like the elements of kind of the tactics and everything involved in just like the war with the Longbow Island and just everything going on with them. I just loved all those topics, as well as kind of with the found family that Rin kind of found a little bit at the training academy. She found a couple friends, but then with the psych, like I loved that element about like this kind of like these ragtag kind of mercenaries. I always loved that, and just each one of them are kind of unique, and I loved just how Rin kind of connected with them, and they all kind of work together to kind of like kick ass. Like, I love that. I also loved how kind of the magic of shamanism and how it was kind of summoned. I thought that was so cool. But if you haven't heard of this follows Rin, who's a peasant girl who kind of lives in this kind of remote village that's kind of discarded from the rest of the empire, and she aces the Keiju, which allows her entrance into the most renowned kind of training academy. But at the training academy she learns tactics, fighting, and all that. And at the kind of close to graduation, like, you definitely see a lot of time period kind of passed over in this first book, and towards the end of the graduation there's kind of war looming over the horizon, and Rin is kind of just thrown into a war, and just seeing how her decisions kind of affect her as well as others, and just like the empire in general. So I just loved just everything about this, but I would definitely recommend if you haven't checked it out. Next up, we had Iron Widow, which is the Biblionauts book club pick for January. But in here you follow Zitan, whose sister was kind of offered up as a concubine pilot to help pilot the chrysalises. And these chrysalises are powered by a male and female like a pair. But most of the time in these battles with the Hunduns, which are kind of like these monsters that come from another dimension, and these chrysalises kind of have to fight them. But often in the battles, kind of like the female concubine pilot is often sacrificed. And Zitan's sister was kind of one of those pilots that kind of died, and she vows revenge. So she offers herself up as a concubine pilot, and she gets paired with her sister's killer. And then after that, like, without going much more into spoilers, like, she is just kind of trying to take down the patriarchy. And that was one thing I did enjoy about this, like, was just bringing down kind of like the patriarchy and kind of bringing power back to women, as well as kind of like the giant mechs fighting the Hunduns. Like, I love that, because Pacific Rim is one movie that I did enjoy, but then there was just like this middle chunk where it was just honestly a slog for me. But because of the events that happened early on in the book, Zitan is kind of sent back to the capital, and she kind of has to fight for survival there instead of like in the chrysalises, which is what I was wanting. It almost felt like in kind of Catching Fire with Katniss and Peter trying to pretend that they were in love. Like, I thought that was what was going on, and that was like just the whole middle chunk of the book. And then the final 70 pages or so, like, it really got back to what I was enjoying in the beginning. And then like the ending, I was so disappointed by the epilogue. Like, the whole ending I thought was really well done, but the epilogue, like, I thought that was just like unnecessary. And honestly, if I don't hear great things about the second book, I will not continue on. Like, I felt like it could have been like a standalone on its own, and I did enjoy kind of the way that the outcome kind of played out. But that is kind of just like my own opinion, and I think a lot of people are actually enjoying this, and I did enjoy it. Like, I ended up giving it 3 stars, but it just like didn't connect like what I was hoping with. Like, in the beginning, like, kicked off really good, and then it just like the middle chunk was just not connecting with me at all. I did enjoy kind of Zaytan as a character because she's just full of rage and hatred, and you definitely see that throughout the story, and I just kind of love seeing her kind of interactions with other people. And then at the end, she makes like one decision, or I was just like, my mouth was hanging open. I was like, what? So I did enjoy kind of hers kind of main perspective as well. But this is still popular for many people. I just wasn't kind of as much for me. I knocked down my bookshelf. But and the final book that I picked up this month was A Gentleman in Moscow by Immortals. This is a book that I put on so many TBRs and I've been wanting to pick up for some time. And just out of nowhere, out of the blue, like my library loan for the audiobook came in, and I thought it was just perfect time to pick it up. But overall, I really enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. But Russian kind of history, and especially kind of this history that's kind of covered, has always been a topic that I covered. This follows just after the events of the Russian Revolution and kind of the Bolsheviks kind of rising to power. But in here you follow Count Alexander Rostov, who is an aristocrat, but he's been sentenced to house arrest within the Metropole, which is like one of the biggest hotels in Moscow, and it's actually really close to the Kremlin. So he gets to see kind of everything kind of unfolding and the changes coming to Moscow as well. And you just see just like his whole life basically within the Metropole, and just seeing kind of the human interactions that he has with just all the kind of staff and just the guests that kind of visit, and just seeing how they are kind of changed by the events kind of occurring outside, and just the Metropole as well. And he's definitely kind of thrown into a position that he's kind of not used to, because he's considered like a gentleman and an aristocrat, and he was of nobility. So he's kind of been stripped of all that and just kind of thrown into an attic room. And I just love seeing how he kind of responded to that, as well as kind of everyone kind of interacting with him. And I love kind of the found family that he found with the staff and all the members. Like, there's their close-knitness and everything. Like, I loved that. That being said, that there was definitely points where it was really kind of, like, it felt like there were some points that were just unnecessary, and it just felt like it was, like, it could have been cut out to make this book a little bit shorter, because it is a thick book. It's over 400 pages. And throughout the book, there's little kind of anecdotes and kind of footnotes that are included that actually include elements of Russian like history and events that was actually occurring, kind of explaining more about the story. And I loved kind of learning more about just like every nook and cranny involved in the Metropole, and how the Count is kind of just interacting with the Metropole, as well as the kind of perspectives. Like, there was one perspective that kind of really hit me, and it was really like heartwarming to see it, because it just like, I can't really spoil anything, but if you've read it and you kind of know about Sophia, I just love that element of it. I think a lot of people might find this boring because everything kind of occurs in the Metropole, but I kind of just enjoyed that element of it, kind of being stuck in just one place and kind of having to watch everything kind of unfold in front of him. And then there at the end, like, it really kind of got heartbreaking, because it covers his whole lifespan. And just like seeing how, like, I'm not going to say any more without spoiling it, but I did enjoy kind of how it ended and like how it played out there towards the end. But the only reason that I gave it 4 stars was because of just like those unnecessary parts that I felt like could have been cut out. But I would definitely recommend this if this has sounded good to you at all. But that is going to be all for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed. This has been a big wrap up, and it was just a really great month of reading. What was your favorite book of the month of January, and what are you planning on reading for February? But it is time for Ellie to come on here and first wish you all to have a splendid day. But she also says that adventure is out there. So I'll catch you next time. Bye.